Warren.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals, and that I am opening up the East Milton residence application here at 7 o'clock. Because we had some other eminent domain, some other 40B cases that have not started, but need to be continued so that we're protecting everyone's record rights. What we're going to do by agreement of the parties, we're going to adjourn the East Milton residence hearing at this time, and we're going to continue the hearing by agreement of all the parties till 7:30 this evening. So we're going to be delaying this about 24 minutes while we take care of 3 other continuances. And then at 7:30 this evening, we will resume the hearing on the merits of the residences at East Milton Square. So without objection, this hearing is continued until 7:30 p.m. This evening. And we'll be adjourned as to the East Milton residence hearing. So Bev, you let me know when it's 7:05 and we'll.
I sure will.
Jesse on board. Hi, Mr. Shoma. How are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals. I have 7:05, so we're going to open the hearing on the 16 Amor application. And as you know, this application is really waiting for the Blue Hill Avenue application to be concluded. That is substantially complete, so we can start this 16 Amor Avenue 40B project. And Bev, what's the continuance date into January?
The 13th, Jesse? Yes, the 13th.
Okay. And so I think by agreement of the parties, we're going to continue this hearing to January 13th at 7 p.m. With the hope that we'll actually be able to start it either on that date or some convenient date thereafter, after Mr. Shoma had a chance to talk with his experts and check his own schedule. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mr. Shoma?
There is actually. I had a call with my team this afternoon, and I just wanted to give you a heads up, Chairman Leonard. We are going to be submitting a slight revision to the plan. And what has happened since we filed this application is at the same time as we switched to a new civil engineering firm for the 648, 652 Canton Avenue project, we're doing the same thing on the 16 Amore Road and also the 936 Brush Hill Road projects. And so they have come in, Allen and Major, that is, have come in and they've made some slight revisions to the plans. So we're on track to file a minor revision to what we previously submitted sometime the week of Christmas. So we'll be prepared for a full presentation on the 13th of January if you would like to hear it. If you're ready for us to open the substantive part of the hearing, or if you'd prefer, we can schedule a different date. But we're prepared to go forward on that day.
Okay, that's great. My inclination, without talking to the other board members and checking their schedules, which we will do, and we'll get back to you, is if we could start it on the 13th, I would jump for joy at that. I was telling Mr. Freeman that I did have a Superior Court jury trial that was going to run 14 days in January, and it's been continued to June. So I am breaking free to some extent, and I'd like to put that time to good use if we can do it. So why don't you file whatever you have to do as quickly as you can. We'll circulate it. And we'll be in touch with you as time passes here and see if it's still convenient and appropriate to start the hearing on January 13th. But if you don't have anything further to add, we'll continue this case by agreement of the parties to January 13th. Is that 7 o'clock, Bev?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 7 o'clock. Yep.
And that's by agreement of all the parties.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything further to add, Mr. Schomer?
Just one question, if I may, and this may be for you as well as for Mr. O'Brien, is the plan for the 16 Amore and 936 Brush Hill Avenue projects to be heard on the same evening, or will those be separated into different evenings?
I don't think we've discussed that, but I think they should be separated into different evenings, okay, just to prevent confusion of issues and to give the experts some wiggle room. Bev, is that how we are planning to do this? Have you talked with Judy? And
no, but I hope that's the case. I to do back to back the same night. Just we don't know how long it's going to go.
Mr. Chair, if I can make a suggestion.
Sure, Tim.
So we haven't had a chance to put our heads together on this, but I think it should be just a simple kind of matter of coordination. So if all of these hearings kind of land on the 13th, between now and then, I think we can all kind of figure out, so 16 Amore will substantively start on the 13th. We can figure out, 936 will then go to the 14th or the 15th or whatever. We can all kind of come to that agreement and kind of make that continuation on the 13th. We just haven't had a chance to kind of get everyone's schedules together. But I think, we were never going to do all of these hearings on the same day anyway. So, Amore Road was in the door first, so it gets the 13th. And then we can kind of figure out from there and kind of jump from the 13th to the next two dates.
I think that's very well put, and I think that's the most efficient way to continue these hearings.
Yeah. So I'll be in touch with you and Mr. O'Brien to kind of figure out everyone's schedule, and we can kind of firm that up with the applicants.
Great. I appreciate your advice, and I think it's well said and well put. And let's hope we can get to some of these other applications. They've been waiting a long time, but hopefully they'll be well prepared and can be handled with a lot of dispatch with the more simplified issues than some of the present larger projects present. So if there's nothing further to be added, we're going to continue the 16 Amore Avenue to January 13th at 7 p.m. With the hope that we can talk to Mr. Schomer in adequate time that we may be able to start the hearing on that date. But if something comes up, Jesse, or you have problems with witnesses or whatever, just let us know, and we'll make that date a more convenient date for you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I will do.
Okay, so we're going to adjourn 16 Amore Avenue until the 13th at 7 p.m. The next hearing is going to start at 7:15, and I believe that's Mr. Frank O'Brien's hearing. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Evening, Mr. Leonard. How are you?
I'm well. Good to see you again.
Good to be seen. Good evening, Bev. Good evening, Mr. Schomer. How are you? Long time no see.
It has been. Oh, I saw you last night. I don't think you saw me.
My loss.
So I'm going to turn the proceedings over to you, Mr. O'Brien, to handle your 936 Brush Hill Road application.
Thank you, Bev. Could you just give me the high sign at 7:15, please?
Absolutely.
My name is Frank O'Brien, and I am the acting as chair for this hearing at 7:15 p.m. regarding the comprehensive permit relative to the property located at 936 Brush Hill Road. This is an application pursuant to Chapter 40B. As many of you who may have been watching these proceedings know, that this hearing has been delayed several times pursuant to the provisions of 760 CMR 56.053 due to the press of other 40B applications that the town has been dealing with. Now that it appears that we're very close to completing the 40B application relative to 582 Blue Hill Road, we are moving closer to beginning the process for this hearing to begin. So given that this particular hearing is limited to scheduling matters only, I am going to ask the applicant's attorney, Attorney Jesse Schumer. Attorney Schumer, what is your pleasure relative to the beginning of this particular hearing, given that the prior hearing concerning Amor Road is now slated to commence, I believe, on January 13th? What's your pleasure, sir?
Good evening. I would suggest along the lines of the suggestion of Mr. Zawinski a few minutes ago during the 16 Amor Road hearing, that this matter be continued as well to the 13th, more or less as a placeholder, so that we can, that you can determine on the town side the availability of everyone to appear for a first substantive hearing, perhaps sometime later that week or later that month.
I believe that that's would not be meet with any objection from the fellow members of the Board of Appeals. Let me ask you an additional question. Given that you will be proceeding with Amore Road on the 13th, would you be in a position to proceed with the initial presentation of your case on this application around the same time or shortly thereafter? I'm mindful of the bandwidth of all of the parties.
We will be. Yes, we will. We're prepared to go forward on the 13th if you'd like, or on some other night.
Okay. Do we anticipate? I understand from a prior hearing that there have been some changes on the applicant's team, I believe in the civil engineering side of things. Do we anticipate any changes to the proposal coming forward from that particular change?
There will be a very, on this application, Mr. O'Brien, a very, very slight revision. The civil engineers of the project, we have a new team member, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major, is replacing DeSelberg Sala as the civil engineers of record on this project. So they came in and they reviewed the DeSelberg plans, and they wanted to make a few very slight revisions, and that's resulting in a few very slight revisions to the architecture and landscaping. So our plan, and I met with my team this afternoon, we're on track to file those slight revisions before Christmas of this year.
Very good. So I think without objection, we will continue this hearing until January 13th at 7 p.m. Excuse me, January 13th at 7 p.m. at 7:15 as a placeholder.
Can I, Mr. O'Brien, can I make a recommendation on that front?
Please, Mr. Sawinski.
So we just continued Amore Road to 7 o'clock. We'll have to open that one up and then kind of, continue it till a few minutes later. I think just in the interest of not having kind of dead air, maybe we can set this one for 7:05 and the next one for 7:10. We can always start them after that. We just can't start them before, which is why we have the kind of, hold on until 7:15.
That's an excellent suggestion. I hate dead air time, so absolutely. Bev, so noted.
So noted.
7:05. Okay.
Yes.
And I think in the meantime, what we will do is we will get our heads together from a scheduling perspective and see if we can lay this out and in coordination with all the other things so that we can spend the appropriate amount of time on a particular night on these things. So, all right. Any further comments from anybody else? Mr. Sawinski, Mr. Schomer? All right. Hearing none. So this hearing is now continued to January 13th, 7:05 p.m. And thank you very much. With that, I close the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Happy holidays, everybody, if I don't see you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
let's see, is Mr. Freeman still with us?
I am still here.
All righty. We're going to call to order the 40B application for a project at 728 Randolph Avenue in Milton. This project, like the two projects immediately before it, being continued because of the presence of some larger 40B projects, but one of which is looks like it's wrapping up fairly promptly. So the thought is to continue the 728 Randolph Avenue application being represented by Peter Freeman to January 13, 2021 at 7:10 p.m. And during that interim period of time, we can see if it's possible to get this case started sometime in January or February. Mr. Freeman, do you want to be heard on the question of continuing this case to the 13th of January?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Simply to say that is agreeable. And I want to thank Bev Sutton for sending out a message in advance, either yesterday or today, to give me the heads up. And that is fine. I gather one other thing. I think you answered the one question I was going to ask. So we may be able to have a substantive hearing in January or after, but you won't know on January 13th. So that would still be to find another date.
I think that's right. And if there are any changes in the interim that make this particular case likely to start on or about the 13th or whatever, we'll certainly be in touch with you and you can confer with your experts. This is a tough time of the year. All of these experts and peer reviewers just yeoman's work under a lot of pressure for private practice and these 40B cases as well. So we may have to jiggle things around, but we'll certainly accommodate your trial schedule, Mr. Freeman, as well as your experts and the town peer reviewers. So we'll try to give you as much notice in advance as we can.
Appreciate that. And yes, so that's fine. We agree to that continuance date.
Okay, great. So by agreement of the parties, the application at 728 Randolph Avenue is going to be continued until January 13th, 2022 at 7:10 p.m. With the proviso that the board will keep in touch with Mr. Freeman as our schedule of 40B cases starts to get resolved so that we can continue to hear applications in a convenient but timely manner for all of the parties. And want to thank you and Mr. Schomer for your professionalism and your cooperation in these cases. It's very difficult to have cases repeatedly continued when you have clients who really want their applications to be heard, and we'll do our best to accommodate you as well.
Thank you.
So 728 is continued until the 13th of January at 7:10 p.m. and we'll adjourn the 728 hearing, and we will resume the East Milton residents application in about 2 minutes. Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Okay. Peter.
Yep.
Hi, can you help me out with the East Milton, please? John, oh, you can't help me out with it. Oh, yes, you can. Too many attorneys. Okay, now I get, oops, I get Jen. About who I'm going to promote.
Right,
Frank Valdez.
Yep.
Yes. Tonight it's
John.
Sarah,
Yeah, tell me who.
yeah, Sarah Ebaughg, E-B-A-U-G-H
Okay.
from VFB.
All right, here we go. Wait a minute.
And Sean McReynolds.
Thank you. Hold on, let me find John. McReynolds?
Yes.
Okay, he's not on yet. Who else?
Also Dot. I'm not
Dot,
sure.
we don't need Dot on.
Okay.
Okay.
Just the audience. But hey, Dot.
Sarah? from VHB?
Yes.
Where'd she go? Sarah. I guess, I don't know where she went. Oh, there you are, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
And so that, I think that should be it. Peter, Jen?
Yep.
Is
Yeah.
that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's 7:30.
All righty, it's 7:30 p.m. and we're going to resume the hearing on the application of the residences at East Milton Square. Just for those who are tuning in late, this hearing was originally scheduled at 7 p.m. this evening. We opened the hearing and then we continued it until 7:30 in order to do some procedural work, continuing some other 40B cases into 2022. For the formality's sake, my name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. And with me tonight are board members Jeff Mullen and board member Nick Gray. This hearing has been continued to this evening. And let me just cover a couple of procedural points before we start the formalities of the hearing. In the interim, since the last continuance, we have received some materials from, let me get my papers work. From Demella Schaefer, dated December 2nd, 2021, by Mr. Valdez, dealing with design issues. We have received a memorandum from Sean Reardon of Tetra Tech regarding major outstanding civil items that have appeared on his agenda. So we thank both Mr. Valdez and Mr. Reardon for submitting these materials. Both were submitted today, and some of the issues that they raise are somewhat complicated and technical, and we understand that it may be difficult to respond to these matters on an hour or two's notice. So we'll try to make as much progress as we can this evening, but also be forgiving to understand that the attorneys for the parties may need an additional continuance date to deal with some of the substantive issues. These two documents are as part of the record and have been entered into a computer database and available to the members of the public by Beverly Sutton. We also received on December 1st, 2021, an email from Mr. Robert Kelly of 65 Franklin Street in Milton. He wrote the email to Mrs. Marina Fernandez of the Town of Milton's Engineering Department, Public Works Department, I think technically. And it contains materials regarding the status of Franklin Street during rainy conditions, and there is an array of photographs that were submitted with that. This actually may come up this evening, but we thank Mr. Kelly for his submittal, and that likewise has been added to our website materials so that the public can have access to that. The purpose of the hearing this evening is to hear from Sean Reardon regarding his memorandum dealing with engineering issues, civil engineering issues relating to the project. We also had hoped to have Cliff Bulmer, a peer review architect for the Board of Appeals. Mr. Bulmer is not going to be available this evening because of prior commitments. I understand that he may be available on December 16. So at the end of this hearing, I think we perhaps can have a chat as to whether the 16th is available to everyone and whether they want to proceed on that date with Mr. Bulmer's comments. And it would be probably good to do that if we can save some time, because I was a little stressed by this application not making the progress that I thought it could make under the circumstances. But that disappointment was turned to, I won't say joy, but at least optimism when I received Mr. Reardon's memorandum, which is very helpful, and Mr. Valdez from Demella Schaefer's, his memorandum, which basically goes through the issues that are at stake in the case. And I think both of these will be, they'll facilitate the advancement of this this case. As I told everyone at the last hearing, I was talking reservations for December because I had a trial scheduled on December 6th in the Middlesex Superior Court that was scheduled to run for 14 consecutive days. I guess to the applicant's delight and to my dismay, that particular case has been continued until January 1st for the pretrial, and I think it's January 14th or 13th. I said January, I mean June 13th for trial on the merits. So I have freed up in December, and so if the parties are able to take advantage of that opportunity, I'm delighted to try to accommodate them so we can give this particular application a little boost and put some life into it and see if we can get closer to a position of where we can make decisions on these substantive issues. So that's my preamble. So I think if it's all right with everybody, what I'd like to do is have Mr. Reardon begin his testimony. And as I say, we'll go issue by issue. I've asked him to look at some of the substantial issues in the case, outline them. And obviously, if someone's present from, certainly Mr. Freeman has full opportunity to ask questions now, or if you have your site civil engineer who wants to ask some questions, that's certainly permissible. But on the other hand, you're not going to be required to do that if you need more time to consult with your technical experts in order to respond to Mr. Reardon's memorandum. The board will be very forgiving in that regard. Since these issues are separate and distinct, and they get to be somewhat technical at times, what I think is the best procedure is, rather than running through the 5 issues of significance that Mr. Reardon has outlined and having him talk for 35 or 40 minutes and then try to distill what he said and listen to Mr. Freeman, I think we should take these category by category. Even though it may take a little more time, I think it will direct everyone's attention to the specific concerns that we have. Is that agreeable to you, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's certainly agreeable. If I may, just with a very brief kind of both introduction and summary, just to say that we certainly understand that these issues that Mr. Reardon outlined, and they're really not new, they were certainly mentioned, and we're working on them as Sarah pinch hitting for Connor will describe. So we don't have voluminous answers yet, but likewise, after we're done with that part, I think it would be helpful, since Mr. Bulmer isn't here, to simply allow Frank Valdez to go through the points that he made in the written letter, and that one probably does call for going through it point by point. And again, you folks may have questions during that, and it makes sense to ask them as he goes through it. So the only other thing I wanted to say, and I'm kind of cutting short what I was going to do for a kind of slightly longer summary, I think we really have made progress. I guess there's still a disagreement, which I regret, and in no way placing blame on either side. But, we do think we've made progress. And the board and consultants and everybody certainly has been courteous and cordial and, trying to move it along. But, I'm saying that to be positive, not in any way to be negative, but just a quick reminder that, we even made changes in response to town comments way back when we were still at Mass Housing for the eligibility letter. And then we have made changes, and they may or may not satisfy the board ultimately, including now, but we do think that, we're pretty much at the point where we will try to satisfy and adequately respond to the technical issues. And as you said, that's not likely to be done tonight because we're still working on it. But we just wanted to tell you that, we do believe we've made progress. There may be only so far that we can go on some things. And, then we hope we can satisfy the board that, it makes sense to still approve the project as we have it currently constituted. So, again, looking positive and forward, I agree. Let's proceed with the details. And, we will then give our, it's not so much side, but our explanation. The only other thing I would add is, in terms of, maybe I should wait till later in terms of the continuance that we would need. So I'll just hold off until the end on that. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. And I agree with you, Mr. Freeman. I think everyone's been acting in good faith here. It's a difficult time of the year. It's a difficult profession, engineering and architecture and the like, to be engaged in. I do understand the terrible pressure that all of these experts are under for not only these projects, but for their other clients on private matters that are of significance. I think everyone's acting in good faith. As I say, I was delighted to receive Mr. Reardon's memo and Mr. Valdez's memo as well. I think it's very, very helpful. And it's really my hope, and I think yours as well, to see if we can accelerate the progress in this particular hearing. And as you say, I'd like to get people on these various issues to debate the issue, discuss it, and give us their last, best, and final offer, quote unquote. And then the burden is on the board to call decisions and make decisions. And we're certainly delighted to do that. And I think that's fair to the applicant as well as to the public. And I think the detail of these submittals will accelerate that process. And I think the sooner this case moves along, the better off it is. And I told you my other civil case has been continued until June, but I really don't want to be handling this case in June. I think we can resolve it a lot sooner than that. And
Great.
We appreciate everyone's best. So, Mr. Sean Reardon, are you all set to discuss some of the issues set forth in your memorandum, your bullet list of major items?
Sure. And I like the idea of taking them one at a time. I think that's going to be the most productive. And let me preface my remarks by saying, I agree with Attorney Freeman. Definitely progress being made. The hard part for us is not being a resident, not being a town employee, not being a board member. I'm sometimes feel uncomfortable sort of making any decisions other than sort of informing your decisions. So, I certainly don't want to give the impression that any of these things are not addressable or let's call them deal breakers. But they're things that I don't feel comfortable just leaving unaddressed for the purposes of my role. Certainly the board has a discretion to accept things as is, and I wouldn't do anything to prevent them from doing that. But I see my role as making sure that I put on the table what our expectations are.
So we agree with that. Let me just stop you, Mr. Reardon, if I could. We totally agree with that. From my perspective here, we have Peter Freeman and we have Bob Galvin and Mr. Kelly and They have participated in more 40B projects than I ever want to even think of, let alone participate in. They're really experts in the field, and we respect their positions as advocates. But here you're trying this case before 3 Boston lawyers who couldn't build a doghouse in our backyard. If we were asked to design a doghouse, we couldn't do it. And if we had to construct it. So we really need to have these concepts dealt with in a thoughtful manner, in an understandable manner, just like the members of the public do. Yeah. So we appreciate the fact that we're the final arbiters here, but we really want to give everyone a full opportunity to discuss the issues in good faith, to reach the accords that they can or they can't. And then we'll have a clear delineation and a choice for the board to weigh everyone's position and to do whatever we think is called for under the law. So we certainly really appreciate your efforts here. I think that you and Mr. Bomer have demonstrated at your own personal expense and time, a willingness to try to do your best, and that's all we ask for. So why don't we begin with your bucket list or bullet list here, and just discuss the first item, which is water and sewer infrastructure capacity.
Sure. So synthesize this down. This is basically, early on, we requested some documentation on the ability of the surrounding water and sewer infrastructure to serve the project. And the reason we asked this is usually 40B projects propose developments that were beyond what zoning contemplated. So what that means is that you're looking at a density that didn't necessarily, it wasn't on the horizon when the original systems were being laid out and designed. So for example, if this were a residential community, maybe they thought there were going to be 6 houses here, not 600 units. So our concern is that we want to make sure that we have some basis for the board to conclude that the infrastructure available to the project is sufficient and it's not going to create any unforeseen issues. And it doesn't have to be a heavy lift if everything's pretty easy. We just need some documentation that gives the board confidence that they're not creating unforeseen issues when it comes to water and sewer. And some of those issues are like, for example, if you have a fire at the building and there's high water demands, is that going to pull water pressures down in the neighborhood below safe levels? And sometimes it could be just a small little occurrence that takes it from 25 PSI, which is acceptable, to below 20 PSI, which is unacceptable. So what we want is some level of documentation so the board can make an educated decision. Same thing with sewer. Just because there are no known issues currently, that doesn't mean that when you add a new demand like of this size to a mostly residential neighborhood, it's not going to create stresses that are going to manifest themselves as public safety issues. So what we're looking for is hopefully some really easy documentation that substantiates that no, the infrastructure is more than adequate to serve the demands. And again, our hope is that we just get a memo on each and everything looks great and we move on. The flip side is we get the folks at VHB do a little investigation and do a little analysis, and we in fact find, oh, whoa, there is a problem. Well, now we can address it and figure out what's going to be done in order to mitigate. And our suggested path forward is just that, is that we do a little bit of work to document that, whether this infrastructure has capacity, and then if it clearly does, the board can move on with confidence knowing that it's not creating any of those issues.
Okay, I guess let me ask you this question because I can see Mr. Freeman getting ready to ask it, so I'll beat him to the punch. The question is, whose obligation is that if the applicant files a stormwater management plan, as they have recently, I understand, which presumably they believe is adequate to makes the water and sewer infrastructure and its capacity reasonably adequate under the circumstances. Tetra Tech and your consultants review the plan. Is it the burden of the town peer reviewer to raise issues regarding the submittal? Or is it the applicant's position to justify and verify the conclusions of the plan?
Well, just to be clear, stormwater is a separate issue. So they've provided a really robust amount of stormwater information. So we're talking just water and sewer. So
Okay, thank you.
Water supply, pressurized water supply system in the wastewater system. I haven't seen any documentation other than an assurance that the DPW has said that there are no known issues. So to me, that's a big hole in your record to make a decision. And what we're hoping for is something that serves as the factual record. Now, as to whose responsibility it is, in my experience, it's always the applicant's responsibility, because only the applicant understands what their demands are, what their project flexibility is. Yeah, and really it's them coming to you requesting relief from local bylaws in order to allow a development that's larger than could have ever been anticipated there. So again, this is one of those issues that, certainly it could be deferred until later. I wouldn't recommend that. But if the board thinks that's in the best interest of the town, then I'm certainly okay with that.
If I understand you correctly, you're suggesting that VHB prepare a very short primer on the adequacy of the water and sewer. Is that true?
Hopefully it's a short primer, which means that there's clear capacity. If they find in their analysis that there are issues, like for example, if they pop a manhole and find out there's floatables and some things at the top of the manhole, which suggests that the system is surcharging currently, then we're going to have to probably get into a little bit deeper, or at least contemplate some more robust conditions in the decision.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know nothing about water and sewer except what you and the folks at VHB tell us. Is a determination of the adequacy of the water and sewer system as proposed a matter of particular expertise, like some people try patent cases or trademark cases but don't try tort cases? And if it is, does your firm Tetra Tech, which I think is a fairly big firm, do they have people who have expertise as to how to test the proposed system and reach reasonable conclusions as to its capacity?
Yeah, and I don't think it's that complicated. These are relatively normal civil engineering exercises. So from the sewer side, that's something I do for most projects that we're the engineer on. Water is a little bit more complicated because you're into pressurized systems, but these are not at all sort of mercurial concepts or detailed studies. And literally, I think the sewer stuff could probably be handled in a couple days' time. The water might be a little bit more complicated, but I think even that could sort of, with some basic information on, they have these things called fire flow tests where you go to a fire hydrant and you check to see what the available pressures are, and then you flow the hydrant and determine how much the drop is as a sort of an indicator as to how robust the system is. And even with something as simple as that, you can sort of glean from that some reasonable conclusions as to whether or not there's any risk to the water system. So to answer your question, this is not an overly complex issue for most civil engineers to address.
Okay, that's one of my primary questions, and let me ask you this: is it reasonably convenient and timely for you perhaps to suggest certain tests or protocols or considerations that the applicant could take that would, let's say, increase your confidence that the water and sewer capacities are proper and reasonable? In other words, could you give 8 or 10 tests or questions or circumstances so that the applicant could answer those questions, and depending on those answers, you'd be satisfied and have confidence that the system is reasonably designed and would work all right?
Yeah, I certainly could do that. I have given sort of Connor indications on kind of the things that we've expected. And I think I mentioned last time at kind of what our thought process was. I don't want to, I'm not the engineer of record, so I don't believe that's my place. Yeah, but and there's also a lot of different ways to skin a cat, to use a proverb. So I mean, I've given sort of defined expectations, but I feel uncomfortable directing the effort.
All right, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. If I may chime in, which I think will be helpful, because I have no problem with what Sean just said. And again, there has been some discussion. So after just a few comments from me, if it's okay with you, it might be helpful to have Sarah chime in at this point on this issue. Without answering the question, because we accept that the board will feel more comfortable based on Sean's advice with us looking into it. I have my opinion as to how this should work, which I discussed last time, and I don't want to go backwards and go over that and cite the regulations and all of that. I think the practical where we are situation is perhaps best called a misunderstanding, with Weston and Sampson on board for a long time with the DPW, as Ms. Fernandez said. I guess I expected, and I assume Connor also, that if there was information from your sewer consultants, not the boards, but the towns, that they would provide information indicating whatever problem, whatever. And so again, yes, we know Sean's absolutely right. He asked about it in May, but for whatever reason, I'm perfectly, fine with just saying, okay, it was a misunderstanding, not trying to place a mea culpa on any party here. So given now what we understand, which is also from Ms. Fernandez, that Weston Sampson does have some things, which I don't know if she's getting them yet to VHB, and they may not cover this area, but, we're going to do our best to cover it, and hopefully quickly, and not make it a bone of contention as to who should have done what, et cetera. So I mean that, positively. And then of course, the devil's in the details. So we are in the process. I don't think Sarah's going to have, specific results yet, but, even if it's 30 seconds, Sarah, if you could tell us where we're at, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah Eba from VHB, sitting in for Connor. I've been working on him with this project.
We'll give you a couple of minutes. You don't have to deal with it in 30 seconds.
Sure. I'll stop the timer then. Okay. So as it's been mentioned, we've been in communication with Sean to address these. And we are also working with DPW and Weston and Sampson, as it's noted, to sort of get the sewer model in this area. We are also scheduling a site visit, as Sean mentioned, to inspect the sewer in the vicinity of this project, and hoping to do that within the next week or so and have, as you mentioned, a memo and the results of that investigation. Same with the water capacity. We've been in communication with DPW to get a hydrant flow test scheduled, and hoping to do that as soon as possible as well.
Okay, that's certainly optimistic. Mr. Freeman, do you want to say something?
No, I think that might have been 45 seconds, but okay. The point is we're trying to do our best to do exactly what Sean said. So that is good.
And if I could add too, I mean, we are in a fairly developed area, so I wouldn't expect there to be issues. So I'm hoping that this sort of goes gently into that good night.
Well, we join you in that. Let me not try to throw a wrench into things here. We're making so much progress, but I think I know Mr. Bob Kelly is probably watching. He submitted this memorandum to Ms. Fernandez of the Department of Public Works, I believe, certainly the town of Milton. And it shows Franklin Street basically underwater. And from a layman's perspective, I can't speak English. It looks like kind of grim conditions if there's a serious rainfall or storm. Is the type of mitigation and the type of water and sewer systems that you are reviewing and that the applicant is proposing meant to not, maybe not cure, but to help control adverse water conditions as shown in Mr. Kelly's memorandum and photographs?
Exactly, but I'd caution that there might be things unrelated to the project that, for example, I would expect if I saw flooding like that, usually that means either a catch basin is blocked or some other sort of maintenance issue has manifested itself. But to your point, the reason we spend so much time on stormwater analysis is because when you develop a project that's previously undeveloped, you're creating more runoff. And we need to take measures to make sure that the additional runoff that's created by the project doesn't exacerbate any of these issues. So for example, if this project was developed without any controls, then when that same flooding occurred, it not only would occur again, but it would occur to much deeper puddles and last for much longer periods. So all that documentation that you see from the project is all intended to do things that store water on site, infiltrate water on site to prevent those conditions from being exacerbated by the project. And I think we're largely at that point right now where the project has demonstrated that they've done what they need to do. And there's a couple minor details that one of which is included on our list about their proposed drainage discharge that I think they're fixing right now.
Okay, great. Let me just, because I want to be kind to Mr. Kelly here. He notes in his memorandum that he thinks that the fact that there is only one storm drain on Bassett Street is really unrealistic to have a proposed 40B project of this size. Is that a factor that the town has insufficient storm drainage that is contributing to these conditions, and or is that not a factor?
I think it's I wouldn't consider it a factor. The principle we apply with projects is so the development project is required to implement their construction and their project in a way that doesn't increase the amount of runoff coming from the site. So what we tend to do is not go too much further, knowing that the project at its boundaries has demonstrated that they're reducing or at least matching what the pre-development conditions are. So we typically don't go too far out into the stormwater system to look for problems because the project in and of itself is dealing with its issues internally, so that nothing manifests itself as a problem, as a greater problem after the project. That being said, it does sound like Mr. Kelly's correct. If there's just one catch basin handling all of that intersection, that's quite a bit of flow that comes to that point because remember, it's taking all of Franklin Street coming down the hill. So I would expect that yeah, if there's one catch basin doing all the work, number one, it's probably not enough capacity, and two, it makes it very susceptible to if anything happens to that one catch basin. If a bunch of coffee cups get stuck in the top of it, all of a sudden you've got a lot more problems than you would have otherwise expected.
Under circumstances like this, so who bears the responsibility for additional drainage in and about Franklin Street? Is that a town issue or is it a burden?
I think Mr. Freeman and I would agree that would be a town issue.
Okay. All right. I don't have any further questions. I'm sorry if I participated too much in this number one. Let me ask my colleagues if they have any questions on the water and sewer infrastructure capacity. Mr. Jeffrey Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Reardon?
No. You asked my question, John.
Okay. Nick Gray, do you have any questions of Mr. Reardon?
Just one at this time. In this part of the town, are the storm sewer and the sanitary sewer separate or combined?
I'm not certain. I would expect that to be answered in the memo, but I'm fairly certain that the local infrastructure in and around the project is separated.
Okay, because that would seem to me to be an important consideration as to whether the flooding raised in the letter we got today, which is obviously a stormwater problem, would affect the sanitary sewer. I'm guessing they're separate, but given the age of the infrastructure in our part of the world, I'm not betting anything on that. Okay, that was my.
And to your point, the good news is that there is no, like, this is where it's really good that the town has said that there's no known issues. What that tells me is that there is no existing sanitary sewer overflows. And if you had a combined system, chances are you would have had some of those problems over the course of history that you'd know about. So I'm pretty confident that we don't have that condition here.
So that reminds me of the phrase of one additional question where we hear that there are no known issues from the town. That's no known issues with the current usage, right? I mean, with the current buildings that are there. Obviously, that's not taking into account the proposed building, correct?
Correct, and it's only what's known. So, for example, there could be problems that just haven't manifested themselves at the surface. Our concern is that there could be either. It could be problems that just nobody knows about yet because there hasn't been a reason to look, or problems that would have been created by the additional flow of the project.
All right, thank you. I'm glad to hear that there seems to be a path forward on resolving this question, because I think it's an extremely important one from my point of view, both for the neighborhood and I would think for the project proponent, the developer would want to know, just like whether or not the soil conditions can support the structure, whether or not you'll be able to flush the toilets in the building and they won't be a backup. That would seem to be, to me, a very important piece of information for the developer to want to know. So I'm glad that we're finding a way forward to resolve that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Attorney Bob Kelly is representing the East Milton Neighborhood Association for his colleague and partner, Bob Galvin, who's unable to be with us tonight. So Attorney Kelly, do you have any questions that you want to ask of Sean Reardon on water and sewer infrastructure?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer to Mr. Galvin. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mr. Reardon, do you want to start with emergency access issues?
Sure. And this is another thing that we talked about last time, and I think Jen and I talked briefly with Tim Zerwinski, and I think we've.
Well, I'm sorry. Excuse me. One question here. I neglected to see if Tim had any questions on water and sewer issues, and just let me pause at that. I don't want Tim to think he's being left out. Tim, do you have any questions on the water and sewer issues?
Would never feel left out, Mr. Chair. You've done a fabulous job of keeping me in the loop. No questions. I just wanted to I've made a note to confirm the separation or lack of separation of the sanitary and storm sewer. And just to kind of add a little bit of context to Sean's memo, we're arranging a meeting with Chase Berkeley next week, the director of DPW, just to sort of go through Sean's list the same way we're going through it tonight with the board, just to sort of confirm, from the town end, Sean has identified what he, finds to be, as he explained earlier, issues that, he doesn't feel comfortable letting go. We just want to get, from a town perspective, where there's overlap from the DPW director. So very, very, very happy to hear from the applicant that they're making progress on these issues. It's really, really encouraging, and I do appreciate it. We just want to make sure we get confirmation on the town end from the guy who's going to have to manage all this stuff in the future, that him and Sean are seeing eye to eye. They've tended to in the past, but we just want to make sure.
Great, appreciate very much. Mr. Reardon, why don't we do topic number 2, dealing with emergency access to the building?
Sure. So this issue is really just revolves around one thing, is that when, I don't know if you recall, originally we had a concern that there was very limited access to the courtyard, and our concern was that, does the fire department want access to that courtyard? And if so, we've got to make some changes to accommodate it. We confirmed, as the applicant said, that no, in fact, the fire chief has no interest in getting access to the courtyard, and would rather respond to things from the outside of the building, either the Franklin Street side or the Bassett Street side. And I guess the call center, I don't know what the right term is, but the box that the fire department responds to is located at the corner of Bassett and Franklin. The problem is that there's no place at that corner for a fire truck that responds to a call to pull off the road. So we had a discussion with the fire chief, and it was my sort of takeaway from that meeting that he expected some accommodation that would allow him to take his fire truck and pull it onto the site and not be stuck out in the intersection of Bassett and Franklin. There was some confusion about what the direction was, and it's still my opinion that I believe the fire chief wanted that, and it would be my recommendation that the project be required to provide some accommodation for a fire truck or a police vehicle to pull off if responding to that main entrance without having to leave their vehicles in the intersection of Bassett and Franklin.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Freeman, do you want to be heard, or would you rather have?
Sure, just briefly for either Sarah or Jen or Frank. I mean, I think our position, and again, as I always say, not being the technical expert, my team, if I'm misspeaking, of course, you'll jump right in. But I think we had said that we didn't think it was, creating any safety problem to not have a mountable curb, in that we thought it would be better for the neighborhood and the building to have, therefore, more landscaping available and what have you. That said, naturally, I know fire safety should be, primary concern. So I think what we can do is, because it sounds like that's what you would want, is go back to a mountable curb. So again, Frank or Sarah, whoever wants to jump in.
Sarah, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, we're currently looking at incorporating that into our plans over on Bassett Street, so we can make sure that's reflected on the next set.
Okay, great. Mr. Valdez, do you want to be heard on this issue?
No, I agree with Sarah.
Okay, great. I think we're making a lot of progress on this issue as well. Let me just touch bases with my board members. Jeff Mullen, do you have any questions regarding the emergency access issue?
No questions, John.
How about Nick Gray?
No questions, thanks.
Okay, and
you going to ask Tim?
I am going to ask Tim. I was going to ask Bob Kelly first.
Oh, sorry.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and Tim, not last being least, do you have any statements of wisdom?
No questions, Mr. Chair. I've been kind of going back and forth with Jen Corcoran on this issue. So looking forward to seeing the updated plans. I think this is a solvable issue, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, I do too. Let's go to item number 3, which is drain discharge. Why don't you briefly tell us what this is and what's the status of drain discharge?
First, I apologize for the formatting mistake. It irks me, so just to let you know that I don't usually do that. But so this revolves around the site. Currently, if you can visualize the site, it flows downhill towards towards Bassett Street. The site's current discharge, so where all the runoff from the site goes, is down towards to a connection down at the bottom of the hill, for lack of a better word. The new project discharge is up at the top of the hill. And the problem that creates is that section that leads from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill has much smaller capacity than the one at the bottom of the hill. And what we've asked the project to do is reconsider where their connection is, because it adds a whole lot of new flow at a point in the system that might not be able to handle it. And based on my recent conversations with Connor, they're in the process of doing that. So I'm hoping that that solution is forthcoming.
Right. Mr. Freeman, do you want to be briefly heard on that issue of drain?
I'll simply ask Sarah if you have anything further to add other than that Connor's working on it.
Yep, again, we're working on incorporating that into the plans, connecting, as you said, John, a little bit further downstream in Franklin Street for more capacity.
Okay, great. That's very helpful and very comforting. Let me just touch bases. Jeff Mullen, do you have any questions on drain discharge? Mr. Mullen?
No.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sorry. You may have said no and I didn't hear you. Nick Gray, do you have any questions on the drain discharge issue?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, do you have any questions on this issue?
No, we'll await the revised plan. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Tim, do you want to be heard on drain discharge?
No, I'm all set, sir.
Okay, great. So let's, we're making too much progress here. This is refreshing. Subject matter 4 is parking and loading expectations. Sean, do you want to tell us what this issue is all about and where the parties stand?
Sure, and this is a little bit more subjective. So I guess the point that I'm concerned about here, and I think these are points that Cliff shares with me, is right now the parking is overwhelmingly smaller than standard spaces. So by our count, 78% of the parking that's shown doesn't meet the minimum sizes for standard parking stalls in Milton. Now that's not a deal breaker. I mean, I've done a lot of work in the North End. It's always shocking to me how people can find places to park, but it's just something that I want to make sure that the board understands that, you know, there is a potential sort of glitch in the machine when you look forward, when you know the vast majority of your parking spaces are smaller than what's typical. Similar situation for loading is that, you know, again, you know, North End, you get all those restaurants, they figure out a way to get supplies to their buildings and get their work done. So I'm comfortable that, you know, there's a solution out there somewhere for anything that the building needs to get to it. My concern is that if the loading is sort of de minimis on site, and they have other bigger needs, then those needs get pushed to the public right of way, or pushed into the neighborhood. Again, these are not what I would consider, you know, reasons to deny a project, but they're things that are you know, important to consider when evaluating, you know, what to do on the site.
Okay, that's interesting issues. Let me ask, does Tetra Tech, considering those issues, have any proposed recommendations to the applicant or proposed solution to these particular problems?
So I guess there's a couple wants first, which are like we've been a little bit frustrated with the lack of clarity on the parking level, the garage parking level. We still haven't got the information we need to make sort of informed decisions on whether or not those aisles are big enough and whether or not the parking stalls are big enough. I think I'm a little bit sort of, I don't want to say ambivalent. I'm a little less concerned on these issues because, you know, the vast majority of the negative impacts are going to be felt by the residents. So, you know, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over them, but I do get concerned when I talk to some of the folks in town about how stressed the parking situation is in that neighborhood. That if there's not adequate supply on the site, that some of those demands get pushed into the neighborhood. I don't know if there's conditions that can get written. I don't think there's any real opportunities on site to find more parking. It kind of is what it is. I know Cliff has mentioned stackers before. Those are certainly things worth considering. But again, it's more of, I just want to make sure the board's informed on sort of what my views of the parking are. And because I think that the applicant, in my opinion, has sort of painted a more rosy picture than I share. And it's really just a matter of just making sure that you guys understand what I'm thinking when I look at the plans.
Let me just ask you one question. When you said that the smaller parking spaces and the like are going to be burdens borne by the residents, you mean the residents of the proposed project?
Correct.
Not necessarily the residents in the neighborhood. Is that true?
Correct. I'm sorry for not making that clear. Yes.
Okay, that's great. Mr. Freeman, do you have words of wisdom for us on this issue?
I'm not sure I have words of wisdom, perhaps introduction for Jen, because I think our view overgeneralized is we understand those points, and I appreciate every aspect of how Sean just put that. It's less of a, complying with engineering practices and things like that. And therefore, again, the intro to Jen, they're familiar with these things from other projects, and they do have confidence that they can manage it from their property management and leasing of the property and rules for the tenants and all of that. So Jen, I can't remember if we have a written plan at this point or if you're going to do one, but I think you can certainly elaborate a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Freeman. Yeah, from a marketing perspective, we're comfortable with it. Actually, Frank might be able to speak a little bit on the projects that he works on all over the place, and whether this is a typical situation for a multifamily development like this.
Sure. Thank you. And
I'm sorry, Frank.
I think to Sean's point, I think that he is correct in the observation that the town bylaws for compact spaces to be 25% above the requirement of 25%. Is it better now or no?
That's
much better.
Much better.
What did you just do there?
Sorry, there's a corner in my house that for some reason does not provide. Something happened. There's the Bermuda Triangle of my house.
Well, Jen will come to your rescue after this hearing, but why don't you? Okay,
so
we can hear.
Sorry. So what I was.
I see where Jen gets her paint color taste from.
So what I was saying is that Sean is correct that they are a larger component of compact spaces per the requirement of the bylaws. The bylaws in Milton have a 25% requirement, and we are exceeding the 25% requirement. We are providing a lot more compact spaces, but we are still providing those compact spaces within the dimensional requirements of the bylaws, which are 8 feet by 16 feet. So we are standardizing by that. And the aisles as well, we've developed a one-way system of parking, and our one-way system, the two of the aisles are 22 feet wide, and the bylaws require 20 feet wide for a one-way circulation. The smallest ones that we have, the bylaws require 20 feet for two traffic circulation, but we're only doing one-way circulation, and 12 feet for one-way circulation, and we're providing 14 feet for one-way circulation. So I think that we've done the analysis on a circulation perspective, and I think that the one thing that we are doing is that we are providing more compact spaces than required. But from our experience, we're seeing that people are driving smaller cars, and in a lot of the developments that we're doing, people are not driving the big SUVs and the big cars, and we're just taking from that understanding, and what we've done is just increase the compact spaces requirement in order to satisfy a marketing component of the building on that. But we've tried to comply. We've complied with all the dimensional components. The one piece that is exceeding it is just the compact requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me ask Jeffrey Mullen, do you have any questions here dealing with parking and loading?
What does that mean, that the applicant's complying with the dimensional requirements, but the space is still a compact space? Does that mean that the dimensional requirements for the compact space are being complied with? I don't understand that.
Mr. Valdez, can you answer Jeff's question?
Sure, I can explain. So the bylaws require that a compact space be, and hold on, let me pull it up so I can read it correctly. Compact cars a maximum of 25% of the total number of parking spaces to be used by compact cars, and they should not be less than 8 feet by 16 feet. So the parking for compact cars cannot be less than 8 feet by 16 feet. We are providing that dimensional component, 8 feet by 16 feet, for all of our compact spaces, but we are exceeding the 25% of totality of the parking spaces. As for the aisles, the minimum
I heard on that. Yeah, I get the aisles. I don't think, I think you're just providing more compact spaces and they happen to be as big as they need to be for a compact space. That's what I'm hearing.
We are providing more, yeah, correct. The bylaws require 20%, we're providing more, correct.
Right, but you're confusing the issue, you're confusing the board, you're confusing me by saying you're still complying with the dimensional requirements. I don't really care.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I was just responding. Sean was asking a question about just the dimensional components, and I was just trying to clarify that.
X number of spaces, the vast majority of them are compact, which is in excess of what the town is requiring. And Sean is saying, is that realistic? And you're saying that that's consistent with the kinds of buildings, the kind of buildings that are being built here and the people that will buy and use smaller cars. Is that what I understand?
Correct.
And does that mean that if you live in this building, you will have to have a smaller car? Or the people who use these spaces will have to have smaller cars?
Oh, Frank, you might have to move to another part of your house.
I mean, from our experience, a majority of these spaces. Oh man, the internet here is just like full.
I know, I'm just trying to gauge how realistic this is. I understand it from a marketing perspective, but I'm wondering about enforceability.
And I understand.
If Frank's having issues with his internet, I can kind of, from our perspective, for example.
I was going to say that comes to a market perspective.
Yeah, I drive a smaller Jeep. I can park my car in a compact space. So for me, that's not a concern. It's just kind of a labeling thing. It doesn't mean, we'll be able to accommodate some larger cars, but for the most part, residents will self-select. If we run out of, the bigger spaces, the leasing team will say to somebody, we only have compact spaces left. What kind of car do you drive? If that influences their decision to rent, then that's a risk that we're willing to take. But I don't think that people would opt then to park on the street necessarily. I think that, who knows, but I don't see people, moving in and just trying to, fight for parking every night. If they wanted to do that, they would live in the city.
So Jen, will the spaces be assigned?
Yes, we actually have not gotten that far yet. I anticipate usually, especially in the garage, with most likely assigned spaces, and then have visitor parking, labeled in the surface lot. So most likely the spaces will be assigned. That's usually how we do it.
Is there a parking plan that reflects this so it says what you just said, on which we can rely, so that if you live there and if there are only compact spaces available, then you'll have to only have a compact car?
But you'll be made aware of that before you rent?
I'm just wondering if that's the plan. Yeah.
We could certainly find a way to work that maybe into a condition of some sort. I think, it would be relayed to a potential renter at the time when they were looking at the building, what the parking situation was. Leasing agents usually communicate what the current condition is. For example, if there are no parking spaces left in a building, they'll communicate that to a person who's a potential renter. And so that would just be something that we would do anyway, probably from just a, business perspective. So I'm trying to think of how kind of that would get worked into, something that could be concrete to satisfy kind of the board's concerns.
Well, I think it would help to start with would be, and maybe this has already been done, a parking strategy, like here's the number of spaces, this is how many compact spaces they're going to be numbered. If you live here, you can get a compact space. If there are no compact spaces available, you have to have a different space. And if you can't get that space, then you can't have parking. Something like that. Because I mean, I care less about, excuse me, I mean, my experience is people are driving bigger cars, so that's what I see on the road. Maybe your experience and your developments are different. And that might be good to know too. I mean, even knowing, for example, that this garage is similar to a garage in that development. Give us an address, we can go look at it and feel it, because I share Mr. Reardon's concerns that if the garage doesn't feel comfortable, people aren't going to use it. And we're going to go through a lot of trouble to think about parking as a reliever of what is a clear local concern of excess parking in the community and a limited amount of supply, providing supply that won't be used. So look, if it works, I don't have an objection to that. I just want to make sure that we're stress testing it, and that we've got a plan to implement it so that, we're not doing a fool's errand and realizing, that's just not going to work, That's my perspective. And I appreciate the comment to the north end. This isn't the north end, Sean. I mean, this is Milton, and as much as I'd love it that people would jump on that 215 and jump over the hill and be at Ashmont Station, they're not going to do that. So we got to start somewhere, and I've advocated in these meetings for a bike share and TDM, and all kinds of connects to the T if we can do it. And I think this is a good place to test some of this stuff. But I also know Milton, and people like their cars.
Yeah.
And need their cars.
Yeah.
We don't have any preparing a plan for next time.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be elaborate, Mr. Freeman, but just a strategy. And it seems to me that feeds right into your marketing. But I don't know. I think the town planner may have some ideas on this too, but this seems like it's in his wheelhouse. But
and Jeffrey, just so you know as well, we're also trying to provide a number of electric charging vehicle spaces. We're trying to encourage people to have that. We're also trying to encourage shared parking. And we're also supplying a pretty large bike room as well to encourage bike parking as well, and people using the bike in the building. We're trying to juggle a lot of these things to provide that.
How about Zipcar?
So I think that the intent is to provide car sharing in addition to also charging stations for electric cars, encouraging the idea that if you have an electric vehicle, you can have a designated spot and you can charge it. And those cars typically are smaller.
Okay. Have you had experience in other locations with T-passes?
We've done that in some of, Jeff, in which we've provided that as a requirement from the city. What's happened in some of the buildings that we've done in Cambridge, and I know this is not Cambridge and this is not Somerville, what ended up happening is that about 50% of the parking spaces are being filled because people don't have parking spaces either because of the T or bike. So one of the things that is City of Somerville has implemented is the idea of whenever there is a surplus of parking spaces in the building that are not being used by the tenants because they don't have cars, that surplus goes back into the city. So there would be a sign outside, saying, hey, there's surplus vehicles available from, business hours of like 9 to like 4 for public parking, just because people are not using them. And the building, garage one, and we did a study 2 weeks ago of the whole week study, and 40% by the tenant, so percent are empty. And
Frank, you're breaking up.
Frank, you're breaking up.
It was going well for a while.
within really proximity. It was a 15-minute walk to the T. So that's what we're seeing. That's what we're experiencing. We're seeing that in free areas as well. And, so we're trying new thing for us, but they are implementations. And I think that the T-Pass is actually a good idea that places are providing and doing.
Well, here's a thought. You broke up a fair bit. I mean, I have some familiarity with what's going on in Somerville, but from my perspective, Milton is in its infancy in these kinds of things. I understand that. Milton is Milton, and we can't change that. But if we are going to experiment with some creative opportunities to get people out of their cars, the answer I don't think is lower parking capacity, because at least it's not that simple, because I do think that's going to result in neighborhood parking because people need their cars. You need to incent them to have another mode. This would be the place to do it. This is the best place in the town to try it. So I would urge the applicant to be creative and,
Agreed. I think that's a great idea. And I think that we're trying to test those things out as well. And we're looking for those results, but I think that you're correct. I think that you're experiment.
All right, I've taken enough time, John.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your questions, Jeff. Let me ask Nick Gray. Do you have any questions of the applicant?
No, nothing beyond what Mr. Mullen has so wonderfully raised.
Okay, that's great. Let me ask Bob Kelly from Mr. Galvin's office. Do you have any questions of the applicant on this issue?
Just one, thank you. Where does the applicant anticipate guests to park, specifically guests who have SUVs or Suburbans? If the garage is largely only for compact vehicles, where would the guests go?
That would be on the surface lot is where the guest parking will be. The garage will be tenants only.
So the surface lot will have restaurant parking also?
No.
And will the surface lot be restricted in any way?
Restricted to guests and residents, yes.
And how often, or what's the schedule? I mean, how would that be enforced?
Well, we probably have a tow company enlisted. So, if you're a guest, you need to have a guest pass and your windshield displayed clearly. If you're a resident, you need to have some sort of marker on your car that would be distributed by the management office. And, there would be a sign that says, that you're at risk of getting towed if you park there, and that, that's just, you're at risk of getting towed. How often the tow goes around, I mean, I guess that's kind of operational and depends on, how things go in the first little while, but that's something that we will work on in the future. Because obviously it's in our best interest to have parking for our residents and guests.
Will there be a written plan submitted as part of the application, or is it just see how it goes?
I mean, if requested by the board.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, do you have any questions of the applicant on this issue?
Have to after Mr. Mullen teed me up. But he actually did cover a lot of the issues and the questions that I would have had. The issue, in Milton on paper is that, there's no overnight parking. So as a kind of academic matter, I kind of wonder why it's even a problem. If you can't park overnight, you're not going to park on the street. As a practical matter, I think we all understand that, there's no way for the Milton police to enforce this on 100% every night basis. And so, some people, do wind up parking on the street overnight, and it becomes an issue. And this is a problem that, we deal with on a nearly, constant basis. I think, so it really is important to get this right. To the extent that Sean's comments that this is a problem for the residents of the building is accurate. And I think, we are in the process as a planning department of trying to get off the ground a parking management plan for the East Milton Square district to kind of, pull together some enforcement best practices that we can, deploy, because, there are development projects. This isn't the only one. The planning board is looking at potential, sorry, that's the deputy town planner is playing with his blocks in the kitchen over here. So sorry, I gotta go somewhere else. So we do want to make sure that we have a reasonable level of confidence that this garage is going to be able to support the vehicles that its residents are gonna have. So I think to the extent to Mr. Mullen's point about just a parking strategy for how you're going to deal with folks coming in, I don't know if a condition on assigned parking is within the realm of the board's responsibilities or jurisdiction. And I'm not kind of pressing that issue. If it's over the line, it's over the line. But that may be a way to kind of manage this. That you're getting space number 10. It's this big. Do with that what you will. The thing that I am probably more concerned with is the loading issue. And I know we've talked about loading a number of times, and I know this is a primarily, exclusively residential project, so it doesn't have the concerns that a mixed-use project would have in terms of restaurant deliveries or other types of deliveries. But it would be helpful for me to just, and if I feel like maybe they've done this a half a dozen times already, but just really quick, the Reader's Digest version of where is the U-Haul truck going to go? Where is the Amazon kind of, transit van going to go? Because loading in East Milton, especially on Franklin Street, we don't have to wait for public comment to hear this. I'll tell you, it's challenged. If people want to make that comment, obviously they can feel free, but I think we all recognize it. We all know it. We are in the process, once the construction on the deck is done, we're going to get, a loading zone on Granite Ave back. We've got a parking enforcement officer back. We're looking at other loading solutions, but, we have to keep getting better on this. We can't be getting worse. So it would be helpful if we could just really quickly one more time kind of walk through how those, delivery and moving type trucks are gonna operate on this site.
Frank, I'm not sure how your internet's doing right now.
I'm doing good. Can you guys hear me? I think I switched away from. I moved away from the Bermuda Triangle. My kids are no longer in the kitchen, so I was capable of switching. I'm trying to. So basically, on the latest reiteration of the plans, Tim, that we submitted, what we've done is that we reconfigured the courtyard to be able to accommodate for that. And what we were capable of showing is that for a large part, excluding just one U-Haul truck, we can accommodate into the courtyard most of the U-Haul trucks to be entering into the courtyard for movings and deliveries. The only U-Haul truck that cannot be accessible through there because it's too high is the U-Haul truck that would serve probably 4-bedroom through 3 to 4 bedroom units. But what we've shown from a height perspective that most of the U-Hauls, including the biggest one, can go under the passageway into the courtyard. And we've allocated a designated area for trucks to be able to accommodate themselves, to be able to unload and load per the requirement. We also allocated area for 50-minute drop-offs and deliveries within the courtyard. And the anticipation is that, that's where most of those activities would happen as we move them away from the corner of Bassett and Franklin Street. And we felt confident that, I don't think that anybody would be driving that big of a U-Haul truck into this area. So we know that most of the smaller trucks will be able to go through and park in that area.
Okay, thank you. And I'll take a little bit of a closer look at the updated plans with that in mind. It's imperative that all of that loading take place in the courtyard. So to hear that most of what you anticipate is going to be able to be accommodated there is good. And I just, again, I want to thank Mr. Mullen for taking the words out of my mouth. I love the North End too, but as soon as he said that, I was like, no, you can't say that in Milton. It's Milton. I think we're very clear on what these issues are, and so appreciate the development team kind of taking the consideration, and I think Mr. Mullen's questions and comments are right on.
I didn't say I love the North End. I said I've been to the North End.
On your bicycle, Mr. Mullen?
That's true. I have. Let me just put a fine. I know we've taken up a lot of time on parking, but I think this is important. We give some guidance to the applicant. I think it would be helpful, and with respect, this also responds to Mr. Kelly's point, that some type of narrative, a plan, strategy, if you will, be developed. That's got three main components. The first is what I'm learning is that the parking strategy is tied to the unit strategy, which makes sense to me. And what you're saying is, it's this kind of building commands these kinds of parkers, and we've designed a parking garage to address that. That's a really helpful data point, and I think is important. The second is, I think the parking strategy needs to address both visitors of all types, whether they be, visitors to the units or delivery units, or just understanding how people live today with the delivery trucks and all of the people who come to these places, as well as the occupants. And then the third point is, I think it should anticipate, and this may be difficult, but I think you got to get ahead of it a little bit. What you don't want to do is put this parking plan in place for this somewhat unique building, and then have that be completely inconsistent with what the planning board is trying to do with respect to parking strategy in East Milton Square. So we ought to at least recognize it, try to be as consistent as we can with it, and work with the town planner, or at least express a desire to work with where the town is headed. So it ought to nest in. I understand that you're advancing this at the same time, but that can't be ignored. And so those would be the three pieces of this plan or strategy, if you will. And then I would say, the only other thing I think would be helpful is, I like same as. So what's this like? I think I'd like to go and see it and feel it a little bit, just to kind of stress test it, because it feels like it might be a different, everybody knows you get into these old garages, the Park Plaza garage, for example, or the garage at the Matthews Arena, or, one of those kinds of garages. I want to have confidence that people are actually going to use it, and they're not, for example, going to throw their car over at the fruit center instead of taking the trouble to get down, if they're on a Saturday, taking the trouble to get down to that garage. If it's too difficult, people are just going to be taking up spaces that the Brugger's needs, or the fruit center needs, or the yoga studio, or the liquor store, whatever it is. And everybody knows the square, so I don't have to describe it, but it's the kind of thing I want to make sure we're being sensitive and smart about this whole overall parking strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And that's not a problem for us to provide something like that, Mr. Mullen. I do want to just point really quickly to also the reason that, maybe the parking is a little bit tighter now. And it's because we, made a few changes in terms of the setbacks in the building. That's impacted the parking. There have been, so we get into kind of, as we get to this stage of the project, talking about the trade-offs, right? So if it is extremely important to the board to have, larger spaces and a, smaller number of compact spaces, we'll be losing parking. So I just want to be upfront about that.
Yeah,
and it's
no,
made very clear to us by the neighborhood that the neighborhood has a desire to have even more parking. So we're trying to thread the needle a little bit at this point. So I just want to be on record as saying, being realistic about it. The site is tight. It's, the cost implications for developing something like this are not getting any rosier as the months go on. There's a lot of escalation right now. So just want to be realistic about kind of the feasibility of the project and the way that relates to the parking.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Let's go to issue number 5, dealing with portions of the building being outside of the property lines of the subject property. Mr. Sean.
Sure. I wouldn't consider this like an issue like the others. This is more of just a confusion for me that I'd love to have addressed. And just make sure it's not an issue that we missed. So right now, as currently proposed, there's a portion of the building that extends beyond the subject property. So whether or not that creates issues relative to site control, or whether the board requires additional documentation, it's a fairly unique situation. I've never encountered a 40B project that went beyond, the building went beyond the property boundary. So it was really more just, I'd like the comfort of knowing that this is okay with everybody and it's not an issue. And then I'm happy to go on without dealing with it further.
Well, can you explain a little more basically, what portion of the property are you suggesting is beyond the property lines? What approximately is the area? Is it on the surface or is it on the upper floors? And who owns, to the best of your present knowledge, the property that's being, I'll use the word infringed upon?
Yeah, the good news is that the property that's being infringed upon, it was once part of the subject parcel. We had some original back and forth with regard to the existing building that was on Adams Street that was A&R'd or separated from the larger project. And so this is the area in question. Is if you remember the courtyard, there's a stairwell in the courtyard in the far corner. This is the area behind the stairwell. So it's the corner of the site closest to Adams Court and Adams Street. It's about maybe, I would say 15 feet by 30 feet, maybe. And that's a guess on my part. And it really, it's only the portion of the building that's below grade, but a part of the foundation system, a part of the parking lot. I'm not so sure it couldn't be pulled back and still maintain the parking, but right now is currently shown the foundation extends well beyond the property boundary at that back corner.
And who's the property owner that owns this 15 by 30 foot area?
Mr. Chairman, simple answer, and it's part of why, it's a perfectly valid point to ask. The explanation of what it physically is and where is correct. And it is the adjoining property involved is owned by one of the Falcone companies. And of course, they're involved in the project and all of that. So yeah, they know they're going to give us a subsurface easement. We can't convey an easement back and forth until the project is approved and we go forward and own the property. But if you'd like a short memorialization from the Falcones that they do agree with us that they're going to give that, we'd certainly be happy to provide that.
I think that would be very helpful. Mr. Reardon, do you want to comment on that?
It sounds great to me. Again, I don't think it's a problem. It's just more of a curiosity and confusion on my end that I'd love to have resolved.
Yep.
Okay. Jeff Mullen, do you have any questions on this issue?
No.
Okay. How about Nick Gray, please?
Nope, that seems clear enough to me. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, do you have any questions on this easement issue?
No, thank you.
How about Tim Zawinski?
No, that's I'm sheepish that I didn't go on the GIS assessor's map and look this up myself. But glad to hear that it's common-ish ownership and that there's a straightforward solution to this problem. So no more comments.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much, Tim. Bev, let me ask you this. We've gone through 5 areas of subject matter here now. Well, the board has asked all of the questions that it wants, as have the other participants in the meeting. Is there any member of the public who has their hand up and wants to be heard on any of these issues?
No, not yet, John.
Okay. Then that being the case, let me just ask Mr. Reardon, do you have anything else you want to add to your presentation?
No, just that my hope is, I have a comment letter that goes through other and more specific issues. I'd still love to have a coordinated response to that letter, just so the other items get sort of put to rest as well.
Yeah, I think that's well put, and I think it's well understood. And I did actually reviewed some of those issues, and I think with the good faith that's being shown by the applicant here, a lot of those issues can be resolved outside the hearing process.
Yes. We'll certainly have VHB do that response to that more detailed letter.
Okay,
it's in progress. Yeah.
Do you have anything further to add, Mr. Freeman, on the?
Not on these topics, as you said. That's a very helpful, fruitful discussion tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. Let me go to the second part of this. We did receive this letter December 2nd, 2021 from Mr. Valdez. And it basically our responses in red as shown to Cliff Bomer's some of the questions that he's raised on the design issues. Do you want to spend some time on this at the present time, Mr. Freeman, or do you think it's more productive to provide this letter to Mr. Bomer and to resolve as many of these issues with Demella Schaefer as possible and deal with it as part of his presentation at the next hearing?
Yeah, if it was 10 o'clock, I might say no, but I think, if you all can bear with us, I would like to have Frank go through it because I think it will be beneficial to everybody, including perhaps getting some feedback. And, I leave it to Frank's discretion. If you want to, read every word of your red comments, you may need to, but albeit there's a whole bunch of points,
I just want to preface the board that is 33 comments and questions. So if you want to go through 33 comments at this point, bit by bit, we should just ask that question, and I'm happy to read through all 33 comments and my 33 responses. But I think that from the large part, I think that the big items we have responded to, and I think that between some of the issues that Sean brought up, I think that we have addressed some of those components as well, and some of the bigger components. I think there's a lot of smaller pieces that are subjective, pertaining to the interior of the building or, cars shedding light into units that I think that I would say that we need to spend this time going through every single piece.
Okay, let me do this. If you had to go through the 33 items, Mr. Valdez, how long do you think that would take?
I don't know. I can try to do my best. You think
it could be presented in a coherent manner, or do you think it may be better to submit this to Cliff
if we're gonna go through this tonight, and then I'm gonna have to go through it again with Cliff on the 16th, I think that's redundant, correct? So you tell me if we're doing this today, and it will be able to be resolved today or that. That's great. But if
let me intervene with a suggestion. Ultimately, of course,
Mr. Chairman, please.
Mr. Chairman, you can direct us, but I would say this because again, the previous discussion was helpful, and although you certainly all can read it on your own, probably didn't have time to absorb it, yesterday or today. I think you got it today, actually. What I would suggest is this, albeit there are 33 points, the responses are not super lengthy, but my suggestion is maybe start with mentioning, describing, Frank, what there are 10, if I counted correctly, that issues are resolved. So my suggestion is, Frank, if you go through the points that are, resolved, which you don't have to elaborate because Mr. Bomer agrees they're resolved. Why don't you start that way to orient the board? And then, I would still like, with the board's permission, to have you go through as many as possible, just to, air it out. And again, you're right. We may well go through it again next time when Mr. Bomer is here, but that happens. He couldn't be here tonight. That's okay. So that would be my suggestion on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, I don't suggest that that's unreasonable in any way. Let me just get my comments, get the comments from my colleagues. Jeff Mullen, do you want to be heard on this issue as to whether we proceed with Mr. Valdez's memorandum or we wait to the next hearing? Jeffrey,
I don't want to do it twice, John. I'll say that. I'll hang in there with the board as long as you want, but I do rely on Mr. Bomer for the detail of the design. But whatever the pleasure of the board is, I'm fine with.
Okay. How about Nick Gray? What do you have to say, Nick?
I guess I agree with Mr. Mullen on that.
Okay. I tend to agree with Jeff, and maybe we can make some common ground on this fairly quickly. Mr. Valdez, why don't you take your letter of December 2nd, and since the public certainly hasn't had a chance to read it, and in all candor, I haven't had a chance to read it in connection with Mr. Boma's activities because he was not going to be present this evening. Why don't you just tell us which of the paragraphs, to the best of your knowledge and opinion, has been resolved, so we can just check them off and know that we don't have to deal with them again.
Sure.
And then perhaps the rest until the next hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So we could start with then item 2, which is reportedly access to a border's parking will not be impacted beyond the disruption during construction period. This issue has been resolved. Item number 6, current plans include an accessible ramp that connects the parking garage with the lobby. This issue has been resolved.
Thank you.
Item 9, as noted above, at this point, Bassett Street setbacks are not a significant concern. Issue resolved. Item 11, window types along Franklin Street have been resolved.
Thank you.
Item 13, programming on the large roofscape will be a passive recreation. A perimeter buffer will be part of the scope. Pending submission of more detailed drawings that better define the proposed rooftop scope, this issue is considered resolved.
Great.
Item number 18, bicycle parking, both interior and for visitors, has been resolved. Item 19, applicant has committed to providing 1 car sharing space. Issue resolved. Item 20, applicant has committed to 8 charging stations serving 16 spaces. Issue resolved. Item number 21, applicant has determined that adding office and retail use to the program will not be pursued. Issue resolved. Item number 27, pedestrian walkway has been added to the underpass between Franklin and the courtyard parking area. This is an improvement to the project. Issue resolved. And those are the issues that have been closed and resolved and addressed.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Valdez. That's very, very helpful. Your memo has been shipped off to Mr. Bulmer for his review and comment, and my hope is that when we adjourn this particular hearing, we'll probably continue for about 2 weeks, and during that period of time, you certainly have the opportunity of discussing any of these unresolved issues, if Mr. Freeman consents to that, by talking to Mr. Bulmer, and hopefully that will shorten and make more specific and concise Mr. Bulmer's comments regarding this particular project.
And on the last comment, sorry, Peter, on the last comment that I wanted to just bring up, John, on scheduling components is that, you know, I made the best effort possible today to be in this meeting, to respond to these things. Today is one of the nights of Hanukkah, and my family is celebrating with our family somewhere in this house, and I'm not able to participate in that, but I made myself available for this. But again, this moving to the 16th, I would not be able to make myself available on the 16th if this moved to the 16th, because I also have other issues that I have to address for other projects. So I won't make myself available, which creates this, you know, this rolling ball of things. So I just like to just point that out to the board, that, you know, I am, you know, making my best to be here today.
No, I appreciate that, and I just personally think that these issues dealing with design are important issues, and I really think it's important that you be present when Mr. Bulmer testifies. Mr. Freeman, did you want to
Sure.
with a possible 16th? Or do you have another?
Let's kick that around in 30 seconds, but I just wanted to say in terms of, you asked if it's okay with my team for Mr. Valdez to talk to Cliff Bulmer in the interim, and absolutely. If my memory serves me at the last hearing, because you may recall that Mr. Bulmer had expressed concern that he thought it was inappropriate to have him directly talk to the applicant, or in this case, Frank Valdez, outside the context of the hearing. And, I believe you said that someone from the board would instruct him that you actually were fine with that and you wanted him to carry on such direct discussions. So if you could just remind him of that again, so he won't be reluctant to talk to Mr. Valdez or anybody else from DeMella Schaefer, I'd appreciate that.
Oh,
and just so you know, John, as well, I've reached out to Cliff twice. I've sent emails trying to, because I think that you said, the board said that it would be okay to have that meeting, similar to the way that Sean has had meetings with VHB. I reached out to Cliff twice to try to arrange a meeting, but I have not heard back from Cliff on such a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that information. I certainly will reach out to him. I have admiration for Cliff as much as I have for you, Mr. Valdez. If for whatever reason he prefers not to take that route, then at least the specificity and the detail of your December 2nd memorandum should point him in the right direction. But what I will do is I will talk with him personally, and I will get back to Mr. Freeman if for whatever reason he prefers not to have that type of personal meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Peter, for making that that suggestion.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if those kind of conversations and those meeting arrangements can go through me, just so that either myself or Judy or we'd like to set those meetings up just so that, we've got another set of eyes and ears on the conversation.
Well, I know I like that very much because I actually, I think that's more appropriate. And it also may give Mr. Bulmer a level of comfort that perhaps he prefers not to meet one-on-one with the other side. So that is an excellent suggestion. I appreciate it very much, and appreciate your comments and your suggestion to set that up. And I'll make sure.
So Mr. Valdez can expect an email from me early next week, trying to pin down some dates and times.
That's great. I will try to call Cliff tomorrow if he's around. And I will let both Mr. Freeman and you know whether I've had success in talking to him and what his response is, okay? Now, Mr. Freeman, in terms of the continuance date of we were talking about the 16th, Mr. Valdez is not available. Do you prefer to try to select another date, or do you prefer to go forward on the 16th?
So I have to pull a senatorial filibuster to give Jen time to look at the message I just texted her, which I can say openly anyway. But, my instinct is, I would have loved to do December 16th, and maybe we still can because there's the other issues that hopefully VHB will have made some progress on. So I'm actually thinking out loud. I don't need to filibuster, and Jen, of course, can chime in. I'm almost also thinking in the following regard, because without in any way being presumptuous, but I do think that we are really getting very close to closure. And, the other thing that I think you had mentioned previously, but if I recall correctly, the question of getting to drafting a decision and going over it. And so what I was thinking is whatever date we settle on and agree on the continuance, I know you can't promise it, but it would be acceptable if we try to do this. I've been with so many boards, I may be confusing this board with another town, but if it's acceptable for me to do a draft and or Judy, she often asks me to draft a decision actually when she's been asked by a board to draft them, to do a draft in 2 weeks, I guess it depends how much progress there's made, or maybe we would not want to have it on December 16th because of Frank not being able to be there. But the idea of starting a draft decision so that either December 16th or the next hearing after that, whatever the new date is, we could perhaps also just about be wrapping up and start going over a decision.
What we can also do, Peter, is like if between now and the 16th, Tim and I can have a sit down with Cliff and go through the list of items, and Tim would be there for the record, and anybody else who can be there, and we can go through the items, and any items that we can close with Cliff and Tim there before the meeting, I think it would be advantageous, and then that could be just brought up during the meeting as to items have been coordinated and closed and agreed upon or not agreed upon, and then there might be one item or 2 items or 10 items, and that could be brought up during that time. But I think that we can resolve. If anybody has the opportunity to read through that, I think for the most part, we could probably address a lot of those items that I have answered to pretty readily and with no need for too much.
I actually just realized that I have the same likely scheduling conflict, except I don't want to miss this one, and the other one I think probably colleagues of mine can handle. So yeah, I think it does make sense, having aired this all out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us the time. I think that we have a good likelihood of accomplishing a lot on December 16th. If for some reason, we haven't completed whatever component it is, then we may need another one. So I would like to do that. If it's December 16th, we're going to do our best to address all these questions in the interim. There would likely not be enough time for the board to review a draft decision, but regardless of who drafts it, I think it would be helpful to bring it to closure, which I think we've all said we want to do, to really agree to start drafting a decision. And if we can't go over it on December 16th, then whether you close and then deliberate on a decision or keep it open so that there can be more back and forth, I've done it both ways. But does that make sense to you?
Well, it does make sense to me in the sense that the holidays are a very difficult time to get anything done, number one. Number two, my past practice is to have Judy Barrett to take a run at a draft decision. She's got great experience. She does great work. But Judy is under more pressure these days than some of the peer reviewers. Witness her not being able to be with us tonight, though she assures me that she'll review the tape and all of that. So I know because of the change of her location of business, because of the press of business, because of the seasonal issues, she is also under enormous pressure. And my guess is that she would think it very courteous if you wanted to take a first run at a draft decision. I think that would expedite matters and would be appreciated, and Judy could and add her so-called 2 cents and help to guide the board towards a final decision. But let me just get the feelings of my fellow board members, so we're all part of the process. Mr. Mullen, do you want to comment on Mr. Freeman's suggestion that if he wanted to start to prepare a draft decision, that he certainly could do that, and we proceed on the 16th with Mr. Boma's testimony and then see where we are?
I think Judy should do the decision, because I think the decision needs to line up with the decisions in the other matters. And I mean, it doesn't matter to me if people start to work on a decision, but I don't think we're finished with the hearing yet. So
I don't think we are either.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Right, and I didn't mean to say where. I just, yeah, thank you.
But on the other hand, I think if anything that Mr. Freeman drafted, prepared, memo, outline, whatever it may be, in all candor, because of Judy's expertise, she would get the document and process it and review it and give us the benefit of her comments. So that to me, I agree with Jeff that we're not at decision stage at the present time, but I also have heard of some decisions in some of these larger cases running 50. Tell me that's Judy Barrett.
No, it's not. I must have meant to set something for 9:15 a.m. and instead I set it for 9:15 p.m. But I don't need to be awake. I am awake. No, whatever your pleasure is, certainly, I'll do it. But my intent would be certainly that I wouldn't submit a draft and expect her to go through it and have you wonder whose draft is it. As I say from past experience working with Judy, I'll certainly work with her and wouldn't submit anything until she goes over it. And if she, obviously if she and I disagreed on something, what would be submitted would be her version on those things, so I think that would be helpful and I'll work with her in that regard.
Yeah, no,
it might help. I mean, here's what we did in 582. So Judy Barrett was the author of the decision. We asked the applicant to submit to the board conditions to which they would be satisfied. Those conditions then informed the decision. We also provided the neighborhood association an opportunity to comment on the conditions. That's how that process worked. And then we considered all of the comments as we debated the decision.
Sure.
If that's the suggestion, I think that works. I mean, I'd be very interested in what conditions the applicant believes would be acceptable to be subject to.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I should note in the application that Jeffrey is referring to, I think that draft decision may be 56 of 58 pages, Jeffrey.
About that, yeah, maybe a little bit more.
Right, it's a tome, and I'm not
60
sure.
pages.
60 pages. I'm not sure we have to.
What's your point, John?
My point is that I want to make it easier for both Judy, whom we admire and rely on, and Mr. Freeman, while accomplishing the objective of getting this case to a position where we can discuss it and vote on it with some degree of dispatch. And I think that any cooperative effort that Mr. Freeman can offer that would make Judy's life easier and the board's life easier and expedite this project. And I certainly agree with you to have Bob Galvin or Bob Kelly not only a participant, but a right to submit conditions of their own or a decision of their own, whatever expedites this matter, I think is in the best interest of everybody, including the town.
Yeah, that's all fine. When I write them, I mean, they're balanced, it has to be, balanced to help expedite, I'm not writing something unrealistic or one-sided, which doesn't mean that there aren't going to be other ideas, but yeah, I get what has been said. I'm smiling at 56 pages because that seems a bit excessive, but you never know. I will say for our erstwhile fine litigator that with judges, I've learned to be a master of brevity. I often find that less is more with judges, but I don't apply that in writing conditions. We need whatever we need, and whatever it comes out to, it comes out to.
Right, and you're familiar much more in dealing with the Housing Appeals Committee and Land Court on these types of issues than we are as well. And let me, Nick Gray, do you want to give us your view on this?
Yeah, my view is I was a little surprised to hear that we were considering a draft decision. We haven't really heard from the East Milton Residents Association attorneys in the matter yet. I assume that, they've responded on point by point, but I was under the impression that they were going to provide some additional testimony once the applicant had a chance to present its case in full. So obviously I want that input before talking in much depth about a decision, but if what I'm understanding from your comments and Mr. Mullins' comments, that the process is iterative, and in that as the draft decision progresses, there'll be ample opportunity for the residents of East Milton through their council to have input into the conditions and make comments upon it, then I'm fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had discussions at these public meetings with Mr. Galvin, who seems enormously busy as well, and maybe it's part of the season, whatever it may be, that his views and the views of the association are important to the board, and that he would be given the full opportunity to comment and submit any additional evidence that he may want to. And I'm sure that Mr. Kelly will bring him up to date and inform him that we're starting to get to the stage where we may want to be making decisions on some of these issues, and we will appreciate his comments, his memoranda, his engineering reports, or whatever he wants to submit, and then we'll give him a full time to do that. But in the context that we really don't want to be hearing this case in May or June or whatever, if we can resolve these issues earlier. I know Bob's a very talented lawyer, and he'd have hopefully succinct experts that would comment on the final documents that are being suggested by the town and or the applicant. But rest assured that he'll have the full opportunity to be heard. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may just briefly, I have absolutely no problem, nor does my client, with having draft decisions, conditions, reviewed by Mr. Galvin or Mr. Kelly for their clients. That's perfectly fine. I will say this: I think it somehow seems analogizing too much to a court procedure. This is not the routine protocol. We have asked repeatedly for comments from McKenzie Group. They came last week and had, or rather last hearing, and had, I think, 1 or 2 comments, which is one of the things we're looking into. I'm not saying it wasn't legit, but it's not like a courtroom procedure where, whether it's weeks or months, that we put on our case and then now he gets to put on his case. It's just not like that. There's been multiple opportunities for public comment. And again, without going back to the months and months, and at what point did he feel as though there was enough definition and clarity and close to final plans for his group to comment on. But it's been months. It's certainly been at least since October and the November hearing, and I just, without in any way wanting to take away from a very positive evening, again, they absolutely should have an opportunity both in looking at conditions, and naturally, be it at the next hearing or whenever, they can participate to the extent that you feel it's appropriate in the public comment session. But I just need to go on record. It's not that they're going to suddenly have a hearing or two or whatever they think they take to so-called put on a case. That's not the way these hearings are supposed to go. And I don't mean that to be contentious. It's the last thing I want to do, but I just want to go on record. Welcome comments, but they could have made many comments already. They made some last time, as I said. So I just need to say that, Mr. Kelly, please pass on if you have comments, be it yourselves or Bob Galvin or McKenzie, please get them to us ASAP.
Yeah, and I think
if I could be heard, Mr. Chairman.
Of course you can, Mr. Kelly. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Galvin, the only reason he's not here tonight, he was ill, just for the record. He is available on December 16th. And I believe his intention was, the thought was that there would at least be an opportunity once the applicant had rested, if you will, that Mr. Galvin would be able to either through live testimony or submit a written testimony for the record. So I'll defer to him. Obviously, he's the attorney of record on the case. But I do believe there were representations months ago that the Mr. Galvin and his clients would have a a brief opportunity once the applicant had wrapped up to put on very limited evidence. So that can be checked out. So bottom line, Mr. Galvin will be here December 16th if that's the date the board wants.
Yeah, hey, just to be clear, I'm in no way trying to muzzle him or his expert, sincerely. I just don't want to drag it out unnecessarily because it's not, again, without beating a dead horse, but it's not the typical protocol. It's not really our resting our case and then the other side. It's not an adversarial proceeding, and there's been multiple opportunity for comment by all sides. I will say this in fairness to Mr. Galvin and to my client and to me. You recall this, and Judy's not here to defend herself, but I had agreed with Mr. Galvin that he, and if he wanted, Mackenzie could participate in the workshop. Judy didn't feel that was right, and she told him she acknowledged it publicly at this hearing. And Bob told me as with Frank's, we would say, she was a mensch. She was quite forthright and said it was her doing, but I think that might have set back what I expected would be earlier dialogue between the neighbors and my team. So I don't mean to criticize Judy, especially when she's not here, but just saying that in fairness to both sides, I don't think my client should pay a penalty in terms of time because of that. So, but I think I wanted to make the point. It does sound like it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, I get that's my sense as well, and I think everyone here has acted in utmost good faith, and I think we can wrap up this hearing in a very fair and cordial manner. On the issue of the 16th, Mr. Freeman, do you prefer to go forward on that date, even though Mr. Valdez cannot appear, or do you prefer to bump it until you can get Frank with the ability to be here and be heard or ask questions?
I think yes, we would like December 16th, depending on, results of that, meeting with Mr. Valdez and Cliff Bomer and Tim and or Judy, as well as further progress with VHB on those things. We don't know exactly how much we'll accomplish on December 16th, but we'll certainly have substantive things to discuss. And if we need another one, we address it at that time. But yes, I think it would be beneficial.
Okay, and then that makes sense to me. Mr. Mullen, do you have any comments on continuing this to the 16th, at which time we'd hear from Cliff Bomer and his comments on the DeMella Schaefer letter of December 2nd?
No.
Okay. Nick Gray?
No, nothing further.
Okay, so if, unless I'm missing something, Judy, am I missing something? Strike it. Bev Sutton, am I missing something that we should be mentioning here before we adjourn this meeting?
No, just the 16th at 7:00.
Okay, then by agreement of the parties, this hearing is continued until December 16th at 7:00 for the testimony of Bomer. I want to thank everybody for their participation, for their good faith efforts here, and let's see if we can continue to make progress on the 16th towards a resolution of this case. And on behalf of Jeff Mullen and Nick Gray and the entire Board of Appeals, we want to wish everyone a most happy holiday, and we'll see you in the 16th and try to get as much done as we can. So
we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay. So we're adjourned until the 16th at 7:00, and hope everyone stays safe and stays well.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.